placed its global image under scrutiny. From economic turbulence to complex immigration issues, the once gleaming picture of Canada's progressivism and stability has shown signs of wear. While the country has long been seen as a safe haven for immigrants and a bastion of inclusivity, cracks have emerged in the system. These problems culminated in an unexpected moment of public embarrassment for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. A video leaked to the public and then humorously highlighted by none other than Jimmy Kimmel on his late-night show has ignited waves of controversy and debate about Trudeau's leadership. This unseen freak-out video, in which Trudeau appears to be losing his composure in a highly informal setting, has triggered reactions across the political spectrum. But the bigger question that lingers is this.
After the late actor's passing, a video of Matthew Perry telling a story about being on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in elementary school has resurfaced.
We actually beat up Justin Trudeau. I think he was excelling in a sport that we weren't as... So it was pure jealousy. Right. He was the only kid in school that we could beat up.
Following the viral 2017 interview, Prime Minister Trudeau jokingly tweeted at Perry on April Fool's Day, calling for a rematch after Perry took credit for motivating Trudeau to rise above playground humiliation by rising through the Canadian political ranks. In wake of Perry's death, Prime Minister Trudeau expressed his condolences on social media and thanked Perry for all the joy he brought to the world, saying he would never forget the schoolyard games they used to play.
How did we get here? How did one of the world's most respected leaders become the butt of jokes on an American talk show? And more importantly, what does this reveal about the larger issues facing Canada today? Canada's immigration system, once considered one of the most successful in the world, is currently under immense pressure. For years, the country welcomed thousands of immigrants annually, promoting itself as a multicultural mosaic. The narrative was clear. Canada needed newcomers to fuel its economic growth, counterbalance an aging population, and fill labor shortages. However, what was once a strength has now turned into a challenging issue. In the last decade, Canada's population has grown rapidly due to immigration. While this has brought undeniable benefits, such as cultural diversity and an increase in skilled labor, it has also exacerbated several underlying problems. Housing shortages, inflated real estate prices, and the strain on social services have left many questioning whether the government's open-door policy was too ambitious. These issues have escalated particularly in major cities like Toronto and Vancouver, where housing affordability has reached crisis levels. The economic challenges Canada is facing are multifaceted. Inflation rates have surged in recent years, and with the global economy in flux, the country is feeling the pressure. Many Canadians are struggling to keep up with rising costs of living, and the middle class along the backbone of the Canadian economy feels squeezed from all sides. Wages haven't kept pace with the skyrocketing cost of housing.
Isn't Canada so great? Aren't you pleased to be lining up at a Mississauga restaurant for a minimum wage job? I'm sure this is exactly what you thought was going to happen when you came to this country to study at one of our esteemed colleges. Last summer, for a McDonald's job fair in Kitchener, Ontario, there were at least 300 international students and what appears to be temporary foreign workers applying for a McDonald's job in Kitchener. Think about that for a minute. And what about this video from the fall of last year showing a massive lineup for a job at a Food Basics in Brampton, a grocery store job? Again, these jobs should be going to young Canadians. They should be for entry-level
groceries and essential services, leading to growing frustration among citizens. The Trudeau government's immigration policies, while well-intentioned, are now seen by some as a contributor to these issues, as the influx of new residents has intensified the demand for housing and other resources. In this challenging context, it's no wonder that Trudeau's recent on-camera outburst has struck a nerve. The video, showing him visibly frustrated and unable to maintain his typically calm demeanor, is emblematic of a leader under immense pressure. As if the political opposition and economic struggles weren't enough, the public ridicule by Jimmy Kimmel only added fuel to the fire. making Trudeau the subject of jokes across North America. Late-night comedy shows like Jimmy Kimmel's often use humor to reflect larger societal issues. When Kimmel aired the leaked Trudeau video, the comedic critique wasn't just about the Prime Minister's personal reaction, it symbolized a broader dissatisfaction with Canadian leadership. Kimmel's mocking of Trudeau resonated not only because of the video itself, but because it tapped into the frustrations of Canadians and international viewers alike. In a satirical segment, Kimmel exaggerated Trudeau's outburst, portraying him as a leader who is overwhelmed and unable to keep his emotions in check. It was a far cry from the composed and diplomatic image that Trudeau has cultivated on the world stage.
Would cause a lot of these economic problems. That means that countries like Canada can normally be pretty selective with who they let in, only giving skilled worker visas to people with the best skills, or at least the ones that are in most demand within the economy. If Canada is effectively doubling the amount of people it's bringing into the country in a year, that means that at least half of them wouldn't have made the cut under previous levels. Now, does that mean that they'll be less productive on average, further adding to the problem of more people not necessarily being a net positive? Well, time will tell. What is already a clear problem though, especially in Canada, is people getting around this screening process by just getting a student visa. Canada welcomes a lot of students, which could be a great opportunity since the country is training its own skilled workforce that are literally paying for the privilege, but that's assuming they are actually going to real schools to learn real skills from real teachers. Canada, maybe more than every other major student destination, has serious issues with tertiary education facilities that are little more than empty buildings that let people into the country on a student visa. There are reports of these places effectively running no classes and
Kimmel's humor was biting but reflective of real concerns. As one viewer commented, it's not about the video, it's about the fact that the Prime Minister is cracking under pressure. That's what people are worried about. This comment highlights the growing sentiment that Trudeau may be struggling to manage the mounting challenges facing his country. For many Canadians, Kimmel's segment was a moment of national reflection. If even late-night TV hosts in the US are mocking their Prime Minister, what does that say about the current state of affairs in Canada? While comedy often exaggerates for effect, the underlying message was clear. Canada is not in its best shape, and its leadership is under strain. One of the most pressing issues confronting Canada today is immigration. While the country has historically prided itself on being a welcoming home for immigrants, the reality is that the system is starting to show signs of stress. With over 1 million new immigrants arriving in Canada over the past few years, questions about integration, employment, and housing are becoming more urgent. Critics of the current immigration system argue that Canada's infrastructure is not equipped to handle the rapid population growth. Hospitals are facing longer wait times, schools are overcrowded, and affordable housing is becoming increasingly scarce. These challenges have led to growing resentment in some quarters, where Canadians feel that their government has prioritized the needs of newcomers over the needs of its own citizens. However, it's important to note that these issues are not the fault of immigrants themselves, but rather the result of a lack of adequate planning and resource allocation. As one expert on Canadian immigration commented, the problem isn't immigration, it's how we're managing it.
Workers. That's not me making that assumption, that's an assumption that has been made by many economists before. In 2022, in a Globe and Mail op-ed, this point was raised directly, that increasing the temporary foreign worker program, and of course allowing international students to work a limited number of hours, will contribute to suppressing wages. What's the easiest way to tell if your people are getting richer or getting poorer? Well, GDP per capita is a good place to start. As we all know, Canada's GDP has increased because we've been importing millions of people into our country. But GDP per capita, and in fact, real GDP per capita, which factors in inflation, shows a completely opposite picture. New data shows that Canada's real GDP per capita is dropping 2% annually. Economics professor Michael Scudderud has said that Canada hasn't experienced any economic growth for the past 6 years. So zero economic growth for the past 6 years, despite...
We need to make sure we have the resources in place to support both our current population and the new arrivals. Canada's economy has been hit hard in recent years, with inflation reaching levels not seen in decades. The rising cost of living has been one of the most talked about issues in the country, and it's not hard to see why. From housing to groceries, the price of everyday goods and services has become a significant burden for many Canadians. The real estate market, in particular, has been a source of frustration. Cities like Toronto and Vancouver have seen property prices skyrocket, making home ownership an unattainable dream for many young Canadians. This has led to a growing sense of inequality, with some accusing the government of failing to take meaningful action to address the housing crisis. The lack of affordable housing is not only impacting new immigrants, but also long-time residents, many of whom feel that they are being priced out of their own communities. In response to these economic challenges, the Trudeau government has introduced a range of measures aimed at alleviating the financial burden on Canadians. However, critics argue that these measures have been too little, too late. Growing discontent is palpable, and it's no surprise that Trudeau's recent public outburst has been interpreted by some as a sign that he, too, is feeling the weight of these pressures. The video of Trudeau's freak out, now immortalized in late-night comedy, is a symptom of a larger issue. Canada is at a crossroads. The country must grapple with a range of complex challenges.
When I say someone wants a better life, I'm using this as a holistic term to describe all refugees, asylum seekers, and basically anyone fleeing poverty or any other type of danger in their home country. And when I say people want to make money, I'm simply referring to economic migrants. When we quickly break down Canada's immigrant population, only about 1/3 of people that came to Canada in 2022 were refugees, which means most of the people coming into Canada are economic migrants. And the reality is, people coming to Canada, for whatever reason, are inevitably going to have less respect for our culture, and or they're going to have a very difficult time assimilating to our culture. The and or here is very important because I do think there's going to be a lot of economic migrants and refugees that come here that do have some appreciation for Canadians and Canadian culture for allowing them to come here. However, I do think a lot of refugees and asylum seekers have a very hard time assimilating because often they're not going to speak English to a high degree, and two, they're coming from countries that have very different value systems than the one we have here in Canada. And then we have the rest of the economic.
From immigration reform to economic recovery. While Trudeau has been a charismatic and forward-thinking leader, the recent controversies suggest that his government may need to reassess its priorities and approach. Canada's immigration system remains one of the most generous in the world, and there's no denying that it has brought immense benefits to the country. But as the demands on the system grow, so too must the government's ability to manage these challenges effectively. The key to addressing Canada's current problems lies not in closing the door to immigrants, but in ensuring that the country is well prepared to support both its newcomers and its existing citizens. As for Justin Trudeau, the leaked video may have been an embarrassing moment, but it's also a reminder that political leaders are only human. The pressures of leading a country as diverse and dynamic as Canada are immense, and it's clear that there is much work to be done. Whether or not Trudeau can rise to the occasion remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: Canada's future will depend on how it navigates these turbulent times. In the end, the Jimmy Kimmel segment may have made people laugh, but the challenges facing Canada are no laughing matter. Now more than ever, the country needs strong leadership and a clear plan for the future. The world is watching, and Canadians are waiting to see how their government will respond.
Essentially, Denmark has deemed the assimilation of immigrants, at least to some degree, crucial for social order. And another thing working in the favor of countries like Japan and Denmark is that since it is now so difficult to immigrate there, the people that successfully get their visas and get to go there more than often want to be there for more than just economic reasons. This is what we would call intrinsic motivation compared to the extrinsic motivation of just wanting to make a ton of money. And by default, someone with intrinsic motivation is going to be more likely to learn the language and assimilate to the culture. But unfortunately, That's not the reality for Canada. Like I said before, most people coming to Canada are economic migrants and they're coming here just to make money. Now I'll say here, I have zero issue with people relocating to Canada. We are unbelievably blessed to have been born and raised in Canada, where bombs weren't being dropped on us, where there was equal rights for everyone under the law, where we have clean air and the country is relatively safe. That said, just because I don't fault people for coming here to pursue a better life, doesn't mean I'm gonna